What if I told you that the most powerful player in your medicine cabinet isn't a trillion-dollar American giant or a European pharmaceutical conglomerate, but a country halfway across the world, India? A nation once dismissed as a land of low-cost labor and generic copycat drugs has, over the last few decades, quietly built a pharmaceutical empire that now supplies nearly half the world's generic drugs, and most people never saw it coming. Today, more than 40% of all generic drugs consumed in the United States come from India. In fact, if you've taken a blood pressure tablet, an antibiotic, or even a vaccine in the past year, there's a real chance it came not from a lab in Boston, but from a facility in Hyderabad or Ahmedabad. So how did this transformation happen? How did a country with almost no pharmaceutical manufacturing capability in the 1950s rise to dominate the global market in less than a century? The answer lies in a complex mix of political rebellion, regulatory genius, economic strategy, and scientific resilience. Back in the colonial era, the Indian pharma market was dominated by British and European companies. The entire medical infrastructure was imported. Life-saving drugs were expensive, scarce, and often unavailable to the majority of the Indian population. The country had no ability to manufacture essential medicines locally. It was dependent, disempowered, and sick. But after independence in 1947, things started to change. The new Indian government recognized that access to affordable medicines wasn't just a health issue. It was a matter of national survival. They began encouraging local firms to build capacity. But the real revolution came in 1970. That year, India made a radical move. It changed its patent laws. Unlike most countries at the time, India decided not to recognize product patents for pharmaceuticals. This meant that while Western companies could still patent their manufacturing process, the drugs themselves couldn't be patented in India. Indian scientists and firms were free to legally reverse engineer these medicines and sell them as generic versions at a much lower cost. This was a turning point. It unleashed an explosion of pharmaceutical entrepreneurship. Companies like Cipla, Sun Pharma, Dr. Reddy's, and Lupin began manufacturing world-class generics, often selling them for 1/10 of the original cost. Instead of paying $300 for a branded drug, patients could now access the same formulation for just $5. By the 1980s, India had transitioned from a passive consumer of global medicine to an active, low-cost, high-quality manufacturer, and the world began to take notice. The next big leap came in the 1990s and early 2000s, when Indian companies started exporting generic drugs globally. The demand was massive, especially in developing nations that couldn't afford branded Western medicines. But even the West, including the United States, began to rely heavily on these cheaper alternatives. Today, India supplies over 20% of the world's generic drug volume. It's the single largest provider of antiretrovirals used to treat HIV. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Indian firms were crucial in producing remdesivir, hydroxychloroquine, and even vaccines that were sent across the globe. 1 in every 3 pills taken in the United States is made in India. The US FDA has approved more manufacturing plants in India than in any other country outside the US. That's not just coincidence. That's infrastructure, scale, and trust built over decades. But it wasn't always smooth. In the early 2000s, as Indian companies scaled up exports, questions about quality control started to emerge. The US Food and Drug Administration began conducting surprise inspections and issuing warning letters. Some Indian factories were banned from exporting. The headlines were brutal, but instead of collapsing under pressure, the Indian pharma sector doubled down. Companies invested in GMP, good manufacturing practices, upgraded their plants, improved compliance, and hired specialized teams to oversee quality assurance. Today, India boasts over 600 FDA-approved plants, more than any country in the world except the US. That's not just scale, that's credibility. And the industry didn't stop at just making generics. It moved up the value chain. Companies like Biocon and Zydus began developing biosimilars, complex biologic drugs that are difficult to manufacture but crucial for cancer and autoimmune treatment. Others started investing in new drug research and international patents. India was no longer just copying. It was innovating. Then came the moment of global recognition, COVID-19. As the world scrambled for vaccines, India's Serum Institute emerged as the world's largest vaccine manufacturer. Partnering with AstraZeneca, it produced millions of doses of Covishield, which were shipped to dozens of countries. The Indian government's Vaccine Maitri initiative sent millions of free doses to low-income nations. When other countries hoarded, India distributed. This wasn't just pharma. It was soft power. It was health diplomacy. So what exactly makes India so dominant in pharmaceuticals? It's a combination of factors. First, the country has one of the world's largest pools of English-speaking scientists and chemical engineers. Second, its cost of manufacturing is significantly lower due to economies of scale and labor efficiencies. Third, its regulatory ecosystem has matured to meet global standards. And fourth, its industrial clusters, like in Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Telangana, enable large-scale production and logistics. But perhaps the biggest strength is mindset. Indian companies are built around the philosophy of affordable access. It's not about making luxury drugs for billionaires. It's about making essential medicine available to the poorest patient in the remotest village. Yet even this empire has its vulnerabilities. The biggest one? APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients. Despite its manufacturing prowess, India still imports nearly 70% of its APIs from China. This dependency became a major concern during COVID when global supply chains broke down. If China shuts down API exports, India's pharma engine slows down. That's a strategic risk. To counter this, the Indian government has launched the PLI scheme, production-linked incentives, to encourage local API manufacturing. But reducing this dependency will take years and massive investment. Then there's the competition. Countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Brazil are also developing their generic manufacturing capacity. Western pharma is pushing back through tighter IP regulations and lobbying. There are also ethical concerns around clinical trials, environmental pollution from pharmaceutical waste, and overdependence on exports. Still, India remains the world's pharmacy, for now, and likely for the foreseeable future. From the poorest village in sub-Saharan Africa to the most advanced hospital in New York, Indian medicines are saving lives, quietly, affordably, and reliably. This is not just a story of economic growth. It's a story of global health transformation. In a world where a single insulin injection in the US can cost $300, Indian companies offer it for less than $5. When American veterans can't afford cancer treatment, when African children die for lack of antibiotics, when Western insurance systems are bankrupt from drug prices, India stands as the invisible engine keeping global healthcare alive. It is without a doubt one of the greatest untold success stories of the 21st century, and it's still unfolding. So the next time you open a pill bottle, look closely. Somewhere in small print it might say manufactured in India, and now you know what that really means. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you want more deeply researched stories that reveal the forces shaping our world. Share this with someone who still thinks pharma only means Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, because the next big leap in global healthcare isn't happening in Silicon Valley. It's happening in India.